All right, everyone, buckle up. Today we are talking about the Detroit Lions. And no, this is not a football analysis video. I don't really know much about football. I do like to watch it, but I can't tell you the in depth play calling, the different roster changes, anything like that, salary cap. I don't know the details like that, so I can't really speak to that. Today we're going to be talking about a branding analysis and how the Detroit Lions have changed the perception of the public about the Detroit Lions. And so before you say, hey, that's a sports story, that's not really a branding story, I want to ask you this. What is a brand? And for me, one of my favorite definitions of a brand is a brand or branding is it's all the intangible thoughts and associations you have with a product or service. So all the little mental associations, the memories, the thoughts you have with a product or service. And so this is from Professor Scott Galloway. Don't remember exactly what he said. That's why I have, or something like that. But that's kind of the essence of the definition. And so when we look at the Detroit Lions, when I look at my own perceptions of the Detroit Lions, I grew up in the Metro Detroit area. So that was my hometown team. And so this was my perception of the Detroit Lions in the past. And so the first thing and the most easy and the most obvious one was that we were losers, right? We had a season in 2008 where we went 0-16. We didn't win a single game all season. For 67 years, we haven't won a Super Bowl, right? For 32 years, we haven't won a playoff game. So for me, my whole life growing up in the Detroit area, we had never won a playoff game until last season. And so for me, it just became an expectation that number one, we're probably not even going to get to the playoffs. If we do get to the playoffs by some miracle, we're definitely not going to win, make it to the next round. Super Bowl is a long shot. We don't even have any playoff wins. And so the narrative was that the Detroit Lions are cursed. We had good players. We had Matt Stafford. We had Calvin Johnson. And we had tons of great players pass through the organization. We had different head coaches, a whole number of different things that the Detroit Lions tried, yet nothing seemed to work. And so the narrative was that they were cursed and they were just never going to win a Super Bowl. Then we have Mr. Dan Campbell that entered. And now the perception that I have, these are my personal perceptions and mental associations, are that we are now winners, right? Now it's expected that we're going to get to the playoffs. Like getting to the playoffs is not a question of, if we're going to get there. We're getting there. It's just how far we're going to go in the playoffs. And now the expectation is, and the hope is that we're going to win a Super Bowl. Every season we go in, last season we felt like we should have got to the Super Bowl, came down to the last couple minutes. This season, we were very disappointed with that early exit, but we feel like we have a Super Bowl contending team every season now. And so this season we went 15-2 in the regular season. Last year, Dan Campbell ended the 32-year playoff win drought. And, we have full faith and confidence that soon we will end the Super Bowl drought. The Lions are now fun to watch, right? Like you see the images from the Ford Field where fans are just kind of like bored. They're like, sad, upset watching the games. Now people are like on the edge of their seats watching these games. The Detroit Lions are now gritty. This last thing, I've seen a lot of different YouTube videos and a lot of people in media talking about like the Detroit Lions are the new America's team. So if you don't know, historically the Dallas Cowboys have been America's team. And so a lot of people have been saying the Detroit Lions are now America's team because it's a team that everyone can kind of get behind. It's fun to watch and it kind of embodies the American spirit of, hey, if you just put your head down, you work hard, and you really believe that you can change your circumstances. You can go from being, 0-16 and just known for losing to winners, right? And Super Bowl contenders. And so that's why some people have been calling the Detroit Lions America's team now. All right, so now these are all the mental associations that I have, but how do you actually measure how successful this brand is? Like, are people actually valuing Detroit Lions more? Are they worth more? How do we actually measure this, right? And so let's take a step back and understand, how do you actually measure how successful a brand is, or how do you measure a brand, right? And the simple answer is margin. So let's take a step back and go through an example here. These are two white t-shirts. I'm sure any branding class you've ever taken or any marketing class where they talk about branding, you've probably gone through this example. These are two white t-shirts. Now let's just assume, for the sake of this example, both of these are the exact same material and it's the exact same product. In reality, it might be different. These pictures you guys know better than I do, but let's just assume these are the same exact material, and the cost to produce these are the exact same. So in this, without knowing any other information, you'll probably pay the same price. Let's just say $5 for each of these shirts, okay? Now, I'm going to give you one piece of information, and then I want you to guess how much you're going to pay for each shirt. And I'm going to give you the piece of information that is the brand of the shirt. So on the left, we have Gildan. On the right, we have Nike. So now take a guess at how much these cost. And here we go. The one on the left is about $3, and the one on the right is $55. And so that difference in price, so assuming that the cost of these shirts are the same, let's say it's $2, right? That difference in price that Nike is able to charge over Gildan, that's what we call margin, that's what we call brand, right? So had that brand not been there, Nike would not have been able to charge an extra $53, right? $52, whatever it is. But because you have that Nike logo, and because of all the mental associations, the stories, the ads, all the kind of conditioning in people's minds about how Nike is about greatness, Nike is about just do it, Nike is about athletes, people want to have that $55 shirt, right? And so now coming back to the Detroit Lions, how do we measure brand impact here? So let me move this out of the way so you guys can read this. I got this from an ESPN article. So check this out. The Detroit Lions 2025 playoff debut has become the hottest ticket in franchise history with an average sold price of $855. So I had a friend whose birthday's coming up, and we were planning on getting him some tickets for this game, or we were going to do actually the next game, but then I saw these prices, and I was like, man, let's just figure something else out, because these are some expensive tickets. I'm not going to spend like $1,500 on, a birthday gift. And so this game ranks as the third most expensive non-Super Bowl playoff ticket since 2010. But wait, there's more. There's the impact on the city. So this one game, the Commanders versus Lions game, had an estimated impact of $64 million on the city of Detroit. That's all the people coming into the city to watch the game, all the people coming into the different restaurants and bars and spending money. And then check this out. The average Lions season ticket prices used to be among the lowest in the NFL. And for the 2025 season ticket holders are facing an average price increase of 24%. That's pretty wild. And so you can see like the last couple seasons, and this is from Perplexity. I just asked AI to pull the average season ticket prices. And so you can see this number going up. So because the 17 game season is staying the same, right? The actual supply of games is the same. And then I don't know how many home games there are, but it's the same, probably around the same number of home games. That means that when more people want to go to a game, then the demand increases. So your supply is limited, and then demand increases. I'm messing the graph up, but basically what I'm trying to say is that price increases as a result of supply being limited and demand increasing. Okay, and then Google search volume. So check this out. And this is something that, as a team that really doesn't historically get to the playoffs, or if they get to the playoffs, they don't really get past that first wildcard round. This is something, we haven't really seen. But the last couple of years, check this out. When our team is getting to the playoffs and moving in the playoffs, search volume for the Detroit Lions goes up, and it spikes during those playoffs. So that's pretty cool to see. And so that means in general, and this is looking at the United States overall, more people are looking into the Lions, more people are interested in the Lions, especially when we're in the playoffs. And so when we're winning, more people are looking into the Lions. But in general, you can also see that like over the last couple seasons, our bar seems to be getting a little bit higher during the season too. So this is during the season. Of course, off season, you're not really going to have much search volume. But then you can see kind of like this is a little bit higher, like we're at the 25 range here, whereas before we were kind of under that 25 mark for the last couple of seasons before. So in general, more people are looking into the Lions or more interested in the Lions based on Google search data. So how did they pull this off, right? This is what the meat of the video is. This is what we're going to go through. Number one is leadership. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this aspect because it's more of a leadership / like football discussion. But I do want to say that part of culture is getting rid of the people that are toxic, getting rid of the people and the pieces that are not, sharing in your vision and your mindset. And then replacing those people with new people that actually do share in your mission, believe in your values and all that stuff. And so I think Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have done a great job of, drafting right, and also just replacing the people, and getting like a new roster set up that really believes in Dan Campbell, believes in the mission, believes that they are winners, and then puts in the work behind it to get there. So that's overall just culture. I'm not going to spend too much time because that's more of a football discussion. There's a lot of videos on the Lions turnaround, so definitely go check one of those out if you want more of the football details of how they did it, like the draft choices, the roster moves they made, stuff like that. Definitely like the play calling, the difference in the actual offensive scheme, defensive scheme. Like there's a lot of stuff on that. But yeah, we're not going to get too much into that. Just want to highlight that Dan Campbell did bring this change in culture. Next thing is differentiation. So there's a few ways that the Detroit Lions actually differentiated themselves from the other teams and actually made themselves more appealing to viewers and got buy-in from everyone. So a couple things here. So Dan Campbell is known for going for it on fourth down and really just like believing in his team and believing that, hey, like the offense can get it. And then if the offense can't, like they don't convert for whatever reason, that the defense can step up and make a stop. And so the season before Dan Campbell started, the Detroit Lions were 16th in the league for going for it on fourth down, for fourth down attempts. And so that's basically dead center. And then the season after he started, we were number 1 in the league. After that, the last few seasons, we've been top 5 in the league. I think a lot of other teams are actually just taking the hint from the Detroit Lions and starting to take a lot more fourth down attempts. Another thing that is a trademark of the Dan Campbell Lions, especially under Ben Johnson, is trick plays. They are running all sorts of kind of laterals and throwing, like running backs throwing it, wide receivers throwing it. Jared Goff caught a touchdown at one point. So that you never know what to expect when you're watching this Lions team. And then lastly, like it's become a very high scoring offense and they produce a lot and they're very efficient. And so it's very fun to watch an offense that is scoring all the time and in all these different ways. The next differentiator is the press conferences. And so this, I'm talking about in particular Dan Campbell's press conferences. He is raw. He is vulnerable. Multiple times he's cried in these press conferences. He's honest. He's unscripted. Like you never know what you're going to get. He's a likable guy. He doesn't point his fingers at anyone. He always takes the blame. He's a true leader. And it just makes him so likable. And it's so different. It's such a breath of fresh air from all the other press conferences you see, because a lot of times those just feel like very scripted, or like a lot of times when players and coaches don't really want to be in those rooms. They're just kind of doing it because it's part of their contract. They have to make some time for like press availability or whatever. And so they're just, a lot of times they just have like these one-word answers and they're not really insightful. But Dan Campbell like really just is himself on there, and it's really pretty awesome to see. Dan is not afraid to show how much he cares for his players publicly. And then there's the iconic, bite a kneecap off press conference. That's, at this point, it's become a meme. And the last thing is that the storylines are just so good. Like, I don't know if these are planned or like, Dan Campbell just knows how to like make the most of these moments. But this image is from last year when they beat the Rams in the playoffs. So what happened was, Jared Goff was traded for Matt Stafford. This was at the beginning of the Dan Campbell era. And so Matt Stafford actually then next season won a Super Bowl with the Rams. And Jared Goff was basically like, it wasn't the best. It wasn't the most amicable split from the Rams. They kind of wanted to get rid of him. And so when they came and faced the Rams in the playoffs, it was like a big moment. Stafford versus his old team and Jared Goff like versus his old team. And for them, it was both like, who's going to win, and who was right. And so after the Detroit Lions won, Dan Campbell grabs the football and he gives a game ball to Jared Goff, and he says, "You're good enough for Detroit." And so what's cool about this is that the storylines that he has for his team, like his internal messaging, what he's telling his team, is the same thing he told us in his press conferences, that he wants the Detroit Lions to have the spirit of Detroit, which is resilience, which is a comeback city. It's like it was down, it was beaten up, and then it came back. It kind of is rising back up. And so this is what's interesting, is the storylines with the players also kind of embody that. Like Jared Goff was kind of, thrown aside by his team, the Rams, and then now over here he's kind of had a breath of fresh air. It's been a second life for him. Like, he's actually come back to life and really he's been great, except for a couple of games, but he's been great. And it's like just that full circle story moment of like, hey, like, this is what we want the team to embody, like this spirit of like, hey, when you Detroit means we get back up. It doesn't matter what people are saying about us. Doesn't matter what people think. It doesn't matter, like, everyone's written us off. We're going to embody that spirit of Detroit and get back up and do it better. And so when I'm talking about storylines, I'm talking about these moments that are really just wholesome moments, reminders of the message that Dan brought, and he's able to kind of relay back to his team, relay back to his fan base. And so when you have good storylines, you also need another thing, and that is distribution. And this is the last lesson that we're going to go through. So here's what I mean by distribution. So check this out. The Detroit Lions in 2020 had 0 primetime games, okay? In 2024, they had 6, right? So in the last few seasons, they've gone from 0, 1, 1, 5, then 6, right? That is a very sharp increase in the number of primetime games, right? So you can see here in the highlighted, Lions have a significant increase in primetime appearances over the last 2 seasons, coinciding with their improvement performance. In 2024, they had their highest number of primetime games in recent years with 6 scheduled appearances. This is a stark contrast to 2020 when they had no primetime games at all. So a big part of having these stories, like having these differentiators, like if you're doing all this work and then no one's seeing, you're not going to get the attention. You'll still get attention. Like you'll have your fan base that's going to start kind of picking up, but it's accelerated by the fact that they're getting these national primetime games like Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, where like basically everyone tunes into one game, right? So you get this national coverage. This is their YouTube channel. Now, part of this is that like more people are going to YouTube for NFL type content and behind the scenes stuff like that. But part of it is that, people are just more interested in the Lions. So what I want to show you here is that this is their channel filtered by their most popular videos. This is the Detroit Lions channel. And so if you'll notice here, this channel has been active for like, 10, 15 years. And all the most popular videos, there's 16 videos here. Only one is from before the Dan Campbell era. So there's a lot more people coming in and watching the content of the Lions. They're just more interested in the Lions because of those differentiators we mentioned before. And then last but certainly not least, Hard Knocks. Hard Knocks definitely helped showcase Dan Campbell, his style, and really show a little bit behind the scenes of how he deals with his team. There's a lot of iconic moments that came from that, a lot of clips that have gotten shared. Hard Knocks, if you don't know, is a football show where they kind of go behind the scenes with a team during certain periods. So in 2022, they were with the Lions during preseason. They kind of film behind the scenes, and you get to see inside the locker room the discussions the coaches are having with the players, how they're training, stuff like that. And so here are the lessons we can take from a branding perspective. Number 1, culture change takes time, right? This is the 4th season under Dan Campbell. This didn't happen overnight. Number 2, leadership and culture flows from the top down, right? Like you need to have a head coach, a GM that believes in a certain mission and then conveys that messaging and then gets everyone to buy in. And the people that don't buy in, you ship them out, get new people that do buy in. And then number 3, when you make a turnaround like this, everyone wants a piece of it. Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator under Dan Campbell, during this turnaround, they are some of the most sought-after names. They both have head coaching gigs now. Ben Johnson's at the Bears, Aaron Glenn's with the Jets. Now, both of their personal brands really shot way up when we're talking about like the head coach search for over these last few years. And then the last and most important lesson that I want to cover here is that, look, the Lions have not had a logo change, I think, since like 2017. So like before Dan Campbell. So you don't need a new logo. You don't need new design. And yeah, there's been some minor tweaks and stuff, but like you don't need that stuff to change the perception that people have of your brand. You can change people's perception of how they view your product, your service, whatever it may be, by differentiating yourself by finding distribution, right? Doing marketing, getting the word out there, and really changing the culture of your own employees. Now, that's not to say there isn't a time and place for a new logo, a new color scheme, new brand identity. But just remember, that's not what actually changes people's perceptions. It's the actual experiences they have with your brand. And I will leave you with this. Can the Lions win the Super Bowl next year? Do you believe? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.